Back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, and I mentioned the topic on Zeke. Before I get to that, I want to remind you guys one last time on today's show, if you have any questions or concerns to use, or not concerns, questions or comments, to use the tip and donations link you see on your screen, GSMCPodcast.net. By using that link, your questions pop up on my chat box. I can read them out on air and address them, carry the conversation maybe in a different direction, get a different perspective. All that I think makes it more engaging and more fun, and also it's a massive help for this show if you're able to do that with any question or comment. So again, the tip and donations link is gsmcpodcast.net. And actually, what I just got on my phone, I've been waiting actually a good amount of time to use this on this show. Officially coming in from Adam Schefter, we got some breaking news today, just live on this show. I've been waiting a long time to use that. It might not be the biggest news, but it is some breaking news that I just got on my phone. Former wide receiver Michael Gallup of formerly the Dallas Cowboys, which plays right into this situation in this topic. Michael Gallup plans to sign a one-year deal worth up to $3 million with the Las Vegas Raiders. So, breaking news today on this show to end it on a topic that we were already going to discuss around the Dallas Cowboys. Their former wide receiver Michael Gallup now makes his way over to the Las Vegas Raiders. Not the biggest of news, but it is still breaking news. I've wanted to use that for a while, so I got that opportunity. But Ezekiel Elliott, now the topic of conversation with the Dallas Cowboys. It was announced this morning that he will be back in Dallas on a one-year, $3 million deal with $2 million guaranteed, according to Clarence Hill of the Star-Telegram. And this could all be traced back to last week when Zeke's agent and himself met with the Dallas Cowboys, and comments coming from Jerry Jones as well last week saying that he believed that Zeke could still be a starting caliber running back in the NFL. And all of that just came out with reports about this situation being very close to being finalized, as I'm sure I mentioned last week or over this past week, and that this was sort of just one step away from finalizing, and now pending a physical, he has to pass that. Zeke should be back in a Dallas Cowboys uniform now after a year or two being removed from leaving the Dallas Cowboys. He returns at 27 years old to the team that first drafted him 4th overall in 2016. He spent 7 seasons with the Dallas Cowboys. Very good 6 seasons, 6 to 7 seasons actually, with the Dallas Cowboys on that rookie deal, and specifically as a rookie in his first year. Exceptional season from Zeke, 1,600 yards over that, 15 touchdowns on 322 carries, and since then he basically had 1,000 yards or a little bit under for the next 5 years, and he had no less than 6 touchdowns in any of his seasons, as well as averaging at least 237 carries in those next 5 years since he was a rookie. Then you trace it back to 2019. He signs that big extension in 2019, 5 or 6 years, $90 million, $50 million guaranteed, and earning an average salary of $15 million per year. One of the highest paid running backs in recent memory. I think only Christian McCaffrey makes that sort of money now. Saquon's probably the next highest paid, but he's about $12 million per year. So Zeke was really one of those last running backs to earn one of these massive deals from his team. And then, ironically, in 2019, the Cowboys actually drafted Tony Pollard. And since then, Zeke really didn't play awful since they drafted Tony Pollard, for them to bring him in right away and think that, they had to get Zeke out the door. He still averaged around that same amount of yards, but everybody knows how it went, drafting TP in 2019. Then they release Ezekiel Elliott in 2022, and he signed a one-year deal with the New England Patriots. And now we're at this point where the Cowboys bring him back when he's coming off of a season with a career low 642 total yards and averaging another career low in 3.5 yards per carry as well. Re-signing Zeke after Tony Pollard was also lost in free agency. He signs a deal with the Tennessee Titans to be their starting running back. And now, evaluating this decision, seeing the initial reports, then it's still lingering around with Zeke, not really going away. You kind of start to believe in your mind, Of course, the Dallas Cowboys would want Zeke back, and if I seem, pessimistic about it, not very happy about it, it's just because I still have some questions about it. I'll start with the positive sides at least. The Dallas offensive line is better than New England's. New England's offensive line last year wasn't great, and Zeke still averaged or got over 600 yards, averaged 3.5 yards per carry. Both career lows for him, but, you're comparing that to the great seasons he had with the Dallas Cowboys offensive line and them being in their prime, Zeke being in his running back prime per se. So that comparing those two to now, Zeke earlier on to Zeke now, averaging 3.5 yards per carry isn't awful, and 600 yards behind that New England offensive line isn't that bad either, honestly. If you look at it and compare it to now, Tony Pollard barely broke 1,000 yards with this Dallas offensive line, and I know they lost some pieces in the offseason and they're bringing in young and more inexperienced pieces, but it's not like Tony Pollard was averaging over 1,300 yards, total yards, rushing and receiving, getting 10 touchdowns, 12 touchdowns. It was a lot closer with Zeke at this point in his career than obviously it was in his prime. So Tony Pollard, with what he was able to do, and Zeke as well currently, wasn't too far off, so you can kind of hope there, have some optimism that you might not have this giant decline like some people might expect. So it could be close there. You could still be receiving some of the same production out of that position. And overall, with what they had in that running back room, adding Zeke, I think, is unquestionably the right decision for what they had in that locker room. Zeke is obviously going to be the starter now. They couldn't really roll with any of those guys in that room. So bringing in a guy like Zeke, he knows the organization. He knows what's expected of him. He's familiar with everybody and what they're trying to do. He's going to be the starter, so that makes sense. You improved technically at that position. But what is questioning for me, and still trying to figure this out, is that the idea of signing Zeke, and there was reports, ideas that the Cowboys could, go out and draft a running back in any of the rounds. There was a lot of good talent that you could find later in the second round, third round, potentially. I thought that's what they were going to do. That made sense to me. You bring in a young running back, low miles on his tires, and on a cheap deal as well, not to mention. You bring him in, and that's pretty ideal for what you have. Other than the experience factor, I think it's still an improvement. To bring in Zeke, 27 years old, I'm sure he's going to be 28, on a cheap deal, it's just puzzling because, how much better is Zeke going to be compared to a young running back, not as many miles, and probably costing a little bit more, $6 million, $5 million per year rather than $3 million. If money wasn't the problem, if production really wasn't going to be that much better than what Zeke could give you and a young running back could give you, I probably still would have opted for drafting a running back, whoever it was, rather than Zeke, because with a young running back as well, you have that potential, that ceiling that they could exceed. You don't know how well they're going to be in the NFL without seeing how they get accustomed to it. With Zeke, it already seems like he's reached his max. It seems like you've seen the best years of Zeke already in the past with the Dallas Cowboys, but now you bring him back, and how much more can you really expect from Zeke, not to mention now that he's older, has more traction on his tires. With a rookie running back, there was that potential that he could be great, a lot fresher and cheap as well. I probably would have opted with that as well, drafting a rookie rather than bringing in Zeke. But again, it's still an improvement with what they had in that position group. And just the last thing around Zeke and returning to the Dallas Cowboys, I mentioned that offensive line before. Before when Zeke was there, a whole different offensive line. They were younger. They were really in the prime of their years with Zeke 2019 through 2021. But now they lost Tyron Smith, they lost Biotic, and it still remains a major doubt for me going forward with Stephen Jones, Jerry Jones opting to not really draft too many offensive linemen, or they did draft, I want to say, one or two, but still not a lot of experience now from that group. You know, you still have Zach Martin, Tyler Smith, but Tyler Smith might play in a position that doesn't suit him just to accommodate all the other young offensive linemen that you need. And now you have some questions around the offensive line. How will that affect not only Dak and this offense, but Zeke coming in at 28 years old? You know, he doesn't have those young legs that he did back when he was 21 years old. Now at this point in his career, he depends more on a very solid, established offensive line than he did back when he was first drafted out of Ohio State. He could make something out of nothing, and his talent and just his youth really got him out of a lot of situations. Now, I think you would have needed a lot better offensive line to bring in Zeke for me to look at this situation and think, all right, well, if Zeke isn't going to, provide too much physically and doesn't have it like he used to back then, the offensive line is good enough to create holes for Zeke to still be productive. Now there's some doubts around that, and I don't think those two really match up well. If Zeke can't create his own space, relies on the offensive line, and the offensive line not really knowing too well what they're doing out there because they just have no experience, I think I have doubts around that. But on the positive side, this might not be all dire for the Cowboys. And then just to wrap it up, they are still reportedly looking for other options. Analysts out there still believe that they will make a move, maybe for another running back, and how it all shakes out in free agency going forward. But as of right now, with Zeke being your starting running back, it is an improvement, but I still have my doubts. With Zeke being your starting running back, again, the big goal is all in, trying to get over that hump in the playoffs, win a playoff game. With this being Dak's maybe last year, Mike McCarthy's last year, a lot of questions outside of just the running back. Bringing in Zeke, I don't think gets you to that point and to your ultimate goal. So, how significant really is this deal? It is news because he's returning to the Cowboys, but to reach that ultimate goal that everybody wants the Cowboys to, or at least that the Dallas Cowboy fans want to reach, I don't think that really moves the needle too much for me. But let me know what you guys think in the comments or in the chat box as well. What are your guys' thoughts on Zeke making a comeback to Dallas? Do you think it's huge? Do you think it doesn't really move the needle too much for you? Leave that all down below in the comments so I can read them and interact with you guys. But that will do it for today's episode of the show. I want to thank you guys all for listening and tuning in to today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok for more of the network's content. If you want to see more of me and this show, check out the GSMC Sports Network channel and the GSMC Podcast Network channel on YouTube, where there's YouTube Shorts posted every weekday. The full live recorded shows are all on there for you to watch back, as well as individual segment videos if you missed out on a segment or want to rewatch a specific part. They're all on there as well. Make sure to tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more football discussions and conversations around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you all back here again tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go